Hey everybody, Professor Snart checking in, finally here. Feeling much better, even though the weather continues to be, I guess, sort of depressing, honestly. At least it's sunny today as I look out my window. But we continue moving on through our course. We're about, not quite halfway through maybe. I think we're in week 6 or 7 maybe, finishing up 6 of the term, so getting towards the halfway point. But more importantly, what you'll have noticed is that we've obviously moved into a new kind of genre section of our course, from fiction to something called creative nonfiction, and now coming up on our next workshop. So I'm just going to look at our due dates here. So again, we had an opportunity to conference individually, so I met people in person, I met people virtually, talked about course stuff, about particular writing things, so I thought those were really productive. We moved then into these units 6 and 7, which had us kind of thinking about this new genre, this idea of moving from fiction to nonfiction, and what are those differences, and how do we take something like nonfiction, which can be as maybe objective as a kind of newspaper report, as just the facts of something, but making that creative nonfiction, making it interesting to read beyond just the facts of something. And of course, we're dealing here with things that are more personal, but I don't mean like deeply personal or secret in some ways, just more individual, more things that have actually happened to you. So that's where the nonfiction part is. In general, we're looking to write about events that we've actually experienced. Now, a lot of people will then gravitate to like the most dramatic or traumatic moment of their lives, but there's really no need to do that, especially if you're uncomfortable doing so. But it can also not necessarily be the best choice. So in order to make creative nonfiction interesting to somebody else, we often feel like, oh, I better take like this really profound life moment, and that's what'll make it interesting, which, you know, can certainly work, and we'll see lots of examples in some of the This I Believe essays, and certainly the Unit 8 examples that we'll look at in just a sec here. But sometimes it can be just as effective, even though a little more challenging, to take something, a life event of yours that is not so profound, dramatic, traumatic, deep, all of that kind of thing. Things that you didn't even notice at the time were like life-changing or significant. So sort of mundane daily things. So that's the nonfiction part, but then we make it creative or make it interesting by kind of reflecting on it and thinking about the larger significance for you, but also maybe for other people. So we talk about quite specific things, but we often suggest much more larger, I guess you could say archetypal themes, or really like common types of themes like growing up, maturing, learning about the world, or learning about oneself, you know, self-realization, I guess you could say. But we don't want to talk at that level about the idea. We want to particularize it in terms of like a personal event or something that's actually happened to us. So creative nonfiction is, like I have said to many of you during our conference times, creative nonfiction is one of those genres where the more you think about it and try to compartmentalize it away from, say, fiction, the grayer that area gets between the two. I mean, there's some obvious differences for sure, but you don't want to overthink it, I guess. So creative nonfiction certainly has some basic guidelines or rules that we want to follow, and a lot of those you'll see really by reading some of the examples that are happening in our course right now. But you're still doing a lot of the same kinds of things that you might have done in fiction. So we still want to have like an intentional organizational structure for the piece. We still want to attend to language and the way that we're telling the story. So none of that goes away just because we're shifting the genre a little bit. So let me pop us into, I'm going to skip to Unit 8 here, which is our workshop unit. So the really nice thing here is that we have really a nationally famous writer, primarily known for the creative nonfiction genre, who teaches full-time here at COD. So he's a good friend of mine, and I've learned so much from him, even kind of informally or by accident almost. about writing generally, but particularly writing in this creative nonfiction genre. So Tom Montgomery Fate, and this is another good example where I put some ebooks in here so you can read some examples, but you got to make sure that you adjust your browser so they'll show up. Again, you can find that over in the browser help section, so you may have to, allow the content and all that kind of stuff. But you'll see, and I don't expect by any means that you would read the entire book, either one that I've posted here. But I would hope that you'd read maybe a couple of selections, one in one and a couple in the other, just to get a sense of like the kind of the voice that we're looking for in creative nonfiction. And again, we're lucky enough here at COD to have one of the preeminent voices in the genre, so a great model to follow. And then the rest follows as usual. So the how to post will remind you, obviously of what you're looking for. Posting as a file, same as before. You'll notice that we have our groups down here. The assignment is very open-ended again. We're looking for a pretty substantial work. Grounded in true events, but still showing the reader that greater significance, something beyond just a factual reporting. And of course, can you make things up? That's where it gets really tricky. So for the most part, if you've never been to Paris, you don't want to write creative nonfiction about going to Paris, since that's a major thing that you haven't done. So that's not true. It could be fiction, of course, but it's not creative nonfiction. If, however, you are writing about the time when you were 8 years old and the hamster died or the goldfish died, so not like a profound life moment necessarily, but given the scope and the age of the person involved, maybe sort of a profound moment, or one that you realize looking back was a moment that that kid, you, really started to learn about the world or had to face the world, or maybe your parents handled it a certain way, or whatever. So that's the actual detail. That's the nonfiction part. But let's say the goldfish actually died on like a Tuesday afternoon, and you had skating or gymnastics that day, so you didn't really get home till later. So it didn't have that maybe profound kind of impact as a story that you'd like. So what we might do is change it a bit so that the goldfish dies on a Sunday morning while the family's leaving for church. Not to get all like religious or spiritual or whatever, but it does kind of lend that different dynamic to that event. So it's a slight change, but one that makes the impact of the story a lot more profound. You're not making the whole event up, but you can certainly be flexible with little details like that, or what I would consider little details. But like I said, the more you start thinking about it and trying to really parse out, is it okay to change this? Can I not change that? The more you think about it, the fuzzier it's going to get, and you're just going to get kind of wrapped up in the circle of that question. So sometimes better just to go with your gut and stay as true to the so-called truth as possible, except where little slight changes have a real dramatic impact on the story as a whole. Okay. Right, the groups are here. The discussion board you can click yourself into kind of works the same as usual. Let's take a quick look at the due dates. Remember, we have this double set of due dates here for our workshop. So you're posting your work by Thursday, March 5th. Hard to believe it's almost March when it's like 1 degree outside. And then we have that week turnaround where you're providing feedback. Again, be really conscious to engage the works that are posted for your group. Almost like line by line. Not that you have to comment on every line, but your commentary should be really specific and throughout. And some places you can maybe comment on the effectiveness of a paragraph or a passage. But we don't just want sort of like one summary paragraph at the end and maybe you fixed a couple commas. We really need more than that to get a lot out of the workshop experience. Okay, so excuse me, as always, if you have questions or concerns, be in touch with me, and I will talk with everybody soon.